Let's actually look at the nerfs first, shall we? Let's start off with the nerfs. I think the nerfs are kind of better to talk about first. All right, Renfri's been nerfed in power. I actually thought that Renfri was getting nerfed in provisions most seasons. She's one of the cards which is flip-flopping between buffs and nerfs. Personally, I believe this card needs to be nerfed more. I think it's a little bit too common for my taste. I think it's an interesting card, but it sees a bit too much play. So personally, I'm also quite interested in nerfing the Renfri's gang cards, which are those 6 power thinners. I think it would be quite interesting to make those cards 5 power. I think they would still see play in the Renfri decks, and it's also a slight nerf indirectly to the Triss Meteor Shower, because they would only be buffed by 2 instead of 3 with Triss. So I think Renfri nerf is expected, but personally not enough for me. I think it should continue to be nerfed a little bit more, and maybe we need to be a bit more creative, because it's a card which is going to be flip-flopping between nerfs and balances. I think an interesting approach would be to actually nerf the Renfri's gang. Making them 7 provisions would probably be a bit too harsh, but honestly, maybe it would still be fine. Would they still see play in that deck? Probably. Next up, we've got Admiral Romali, not a card I've ever played. I have been seeing it on the ladder a little bit, and it's been nerfed in a power as well. Choose 3 enemy units, give them lock, poison, and spying. At the end of your turn, boost self by the number of statuses. Highest number of statuses on an enemy unit. I think this card's still probably quite good. A power at this level of provisions isn't a huge nerf. I think it's probably still fine. Living Armor got nerfed in its power. This is a bit of a filler change, because of course it just sets its armor, its power equal to armor. So it started off as a 10-10 with, well, 10 armor, and now it's a 4-10. But this is because people are just not really sure what to nerf. They're not wanting to push too many cards out of it. So this is like a placeholder, and I actually think it's a pretty cool concept, to be honest with you, because the game's very balanced, and sometimes you just, if you don't know what to nerf, I just suggest Living Armor as a little filter. Why not? Up next, we've got Ravid Judgement. This got nerfed by a power, which I'm honestly surprised by. This one seems super unnecessary to me. I have not played this card, and when I've looked at it, I've not been too impressed by the look of it. It's a devotion card, and I think devotion decks don't have that much payoff as it is. So I'm a little bit surprised to see Ravid Judgement lose a power, but I don't think it's a huge deal either. But honestly, not really sure I agree with this one. Up next, we've got Vanadane. I have to say, I think Vanadane nerf is super fine. I think a 6 power Vanadane is very good, and a 5 power Vanadane is also good. I'm pretty sure at one point, the devs actually buffed Vanadane from 5 power to 6. Like, I think that was a change that the devs themselves made, and it's kind of the community reversing this. I think this at 5 power is super reasonable, and actually I think 6 power on Vanadane is probably too much. I like this change. I think it's a good change by the community. Prophet also got nerfed by a power. This is kind of hitting the Nilfgaard Renfri decks a little bit. I'm super fine with that. This card's actually been really impressive in my games against it. It has really, really wrecked me. This card was always a bit of a meme card back in the day, but I think this is a justified nerf, and it hits a deck. Like, Nilfgaard for me, I've been quite disappointed with Nilfgaard when I've come back. There's 2 decks I've played against mainly, which has been an Enslaved deck, which is fine, and then this Renfri Tactical Decision deck, which I have to say, it's very boring to play against 100 times in a row. And I think that, as we're going to see, Nilfgaard's actually got a lot of buffs this season, and I think that this particular Nilfgaard deck getting hit by a nerf is reasonable. I'm not really sure that it's the Prophet that deserved to get hit, but it is also, interestingly, a slight nerf to the Triss Meteor Shower again in this deck, so I think it's fine. NOA Sergeant has been nerfed. I believe every single month of the Balance Council, this has either got buffed or nerfed without fail. So that's really, really fascinating. It's gone from 4 power to 3, and next month it's going to go up to 4 power again. You would imagine it's just flip-flop in between. On-Crate Raiders gets a nerf. Warriors, not too popular with people. I mean, it's definitely a popular deck with people that play the deck, but obviously people are a bit fed up of Warriors because Warriors has caught some nerfs. A little bit harsh on the On-Crate Raiders. I feel like this was a reasonably balanced card, but it kind of is probably still decent. I don't know. Skirmish has been nerfed. Now, this is one I voted for. This is actually a 2-step buff, right? So because you can only, like, you can't have a card change in both power and provisions in a single Balance Council. It's been nerfed in power, and then this month we're going to be voting for it to go to 4 provisions. So it's actually a long-term buff, which just has to start off with a nerf. Obviously, if you buffed it to 4 provisions first, and then put it to 3 power, this month it will be busted at 4 power, 4 provisions. So instead, it's significantly worse this month, sadly, but for the long-term good of the game. So I'm happy with that one. Elder Bear, another one I actually voted on. another controversial change, but this is a change to bearification. Elder Bear itself, of course, did not need a nerf. Of course it didn't. But the bearification card has now changed, where the bearification you use on your own side of the board is 1 point less, but the bearification used on your opponent's side of the board is 1 point less also, which is obviously, because using on your opponent's side of the board, a buff to an offensive bearification. So it's also a change I voted for. In these nerfs, if you're like me and you're not really sure exactly what deserves to be nerfed, I think it's a really cool idea to target nerfs at cards like Elder Bear, cards like Skirmisher, which are long-term buffs. We've seen a lot of the spies, for example, get nerfed in power. Nerfed in power, but it's actually a buff. Onto the other nerfs, and we see the provision increase. Now, what's really interesting about provision increase is for every card in Gwent, it's a nerf, except for the leader abilities, it's actually a buff, right? Really, really fascinating. So it makes sense that we see, I suppose, quite a few leader abilities in here. Again, if people aren't wanting to nerf stuff, maybe we're going to see a bit of power creep in certain leaders. And actually, as time goes on, you get more provisions in a deck in Gwent, which is really, really interesting. So Enslave here has been buffed, which honestly, I don't think was necessary. I think Enslave was really, really good already. But honestly, whatever. I'm not against giving Enslave an extra provision. Blood Money has also been buffed. Again, I saw Blood Money a fair bit, but I don't mind that either, getting an extra provision. Imprisonment also getting a provision buff. This one I definitely agree with. I think that it deserved the buff. But then on to the actual nerfs. The Heist has been nerfed. This card is still probably going to see a fair bit of play, so I think it's a reasonable one. I've been playing against this card for the first time recently, and it's impressed me, so I don't really think that I have any issues with this now being a 13 provision card. Coup de Grace going to 10 does feel a little bit harsh, because you can no longer play this in Golden Necker decks. I'm not sure if you necessarily did anyway, but fear not Nilfgaard players, because Assimilate did get a lot of buffs. This is a nerf to Assimilate, but the rest is a lot of buffs. This one I really hate. Kikimo Queen has been nerfed to 10 provisions. There was a Kikimo Queen Golden Necker deck which really impressed me, but clearly people are a little bit fed up of this card in this deck because it's been nerfed to 10 provisions. I personally don't think I like it. I might even just vote for this to 9 provisions and then check out the Kikimo Queen Golden Necker deck in February, because it's a deck which looked really, really fun and interesting. And I personally don't like just completely killing off a deck with a single Balance Council nerf. I don't think the deck was that good. It did wreck me when I played against it, I'm not going to lie, but it seemed pretty cool to me. So I'm a bit disappointed in this one, but maybe it's justified. You have to let me know in the comments what you think. Redanian Secret Service has been nerfed, another one I voted for. This card's very, very strong, and I think it will still see play in certain decks. 7 provisions is a lot, though. But maybe it's just, instead of playing 2 at 6 provisions, you just play 1 at 7, for example. Up next, we have Open Sesame catching a nerf, which seems super justified. This card seemed very, very strong to me. I actually think that the Syndicate Gang cards were the cards which impressed me most last season, and seemed a little bit overpowered. And I personally might be, in my balance calendar later this month, pushing for some nerfs to the Syndicate Gang archetype. And I think this card was very, very strong as carryover, and I think deserved a nerf. Highland Warlord has also been nerfed. This goes down up to 6 provisions. These were everywhere last season, and I think this is another card which is flip-flopping between 6 and 5 provisions. Primal Savagery going to 5 provisions is a brutal nerf. Not really fair if you ask me. I know it's very strong in the decks with the Highland Warlord, but it's not really the Primal Savagery that deserves the nerf. Like, I looked at playing this card a little bit in my SK Witches deck, but it didn't make the cut, and at 5 provisions it's unplayable in any deck that's not Highland Warlord deck, and I don't even know if it's good enough in that. So overall, with the nerfs and buff, like these two, I'm pretty reasonably happy. I think that there's nothing I completely hate, apart from the main one I'm not a fan of is the Kikimo Queen getting nerfed. But the rest, I quite like pretty much everything to an extent. And then let's look at the buffs. Starting off with the provisions buffs, because I think the provisions buffs are the most impactful of all. A provision is worth more than a power, but certainly on these top end cards. And Aluto Teranova has been buffed from 13 provisions to 12, and that is a big old buff for a big old powerhouse card. Assimilate players, get ready, because that's not the only big buff that your deck's got this season. Yankal Vate's also been buffed to 11 provisions. I think this one's a little bit unnecessary. This card was already seeing some decent play, and I'm not really sure I agree with this one, but there you go. Up next, we've got Fallen Railer, which is a really fascinating card. You can do some fun things with this card. It's got Veil, it's got Profit, remove all poison from an allied unit, then boost self by 5. Whenever your opponent plays a unit, poison it and remove... Okay, I didn't even know how this card worked. I thought it was still working how it worked originally, but it's got some sort of rework, and maybe we'll try and build a Fallen Railer deck now. I don't know. Happy days. Seems good to me. We've got Heimdall. Heimdall has been buffed. I think Heimdall's a Marvel Snap card. Oopsie daisy, you didn't hear that. That never happened. I believe this card's been buffed twice now. So maybe it's good enough. Like, I think it was 12, and then I think it went to 11 last month, and now it's 10. So maybe Heimdall is actually good enough now. It can play for a maximum of 18 points, I suppose. But with something like a dagger, of course, it can play for even more. Artist has been buffed. Mr. Hablau, where are you, mate? It's your time to shine. This is a buff that I'm pretty interested in as well. Whenever a unit is played, damage it by half its power. This card's probably pretty good. This might even be a deck we start with today. I might build an artist deck, honestly. Brothans! This is an impactful one. Brothans has been buffed to 10 provisions. I believe he was 10 provisions way back when. Teranova and Brothans getting buffed. Don't forget, though, the coup de grace did also get nerfed by a provision. So you could say that the Assimilate decks with about a provision extra. Land of 1,000 Fables. But obviously Brothans is just really good in these mid-range decks. And personally, I'm kind of down for Brothans to make a bit of a comeback. Rather than, like I say, all I really played against in Nilfgaard last season was the Renfrey decks. And they're a bit boring. I'd rather play against actual Nilfgaard than Renfrey stuff that's just point slamming. This is one of the most fascinating buffs, in my opinion, Land of 1,000 Fables, which is a location going from 10 to 9 provisions, which is one of the most impactful changes you can get, because that means you can play this card in a golden Necker deck, and that seems pretty damn good. I think this card might be pretty damn good, you know, in a golden Necker deck. Deploy it, play a special card from your deck, order, transform a special card from your hand into a random unit of the same provision cost from the same faction. I think this card's really good and really fun and really awesome, so there's a big W from me. Really cool. It's best with echo cards historically. Like, you could use it on your Aneromancy, for example. Obviously you're not going to be able to play Aneromancy in a golden Necker deck, though. But maybe you could even, like, put your golden Necker back with Alyssa, right? Draw into it, and you don't want to go for the second golden Necker, and then BAM! You transform the golden Necker into a random neutral card at, I think, 12 provisions, is it? That sounds really spicy, and I know I'm going to try it. Triant Mantis getting a buff. I think this one's fascinatingly cool. I've always liked this card. It's a poison with a 6-point... Well, it's a trap with a 6-point body, which poisons. Super cool. I think it's a really awesome buff. This card's probably quite strong in a trap deck, because it's just a bit of a bluff, right? You bluff. Even if you don't get the poison, it's just an extra playable trap to make your opponent guessing, keep them thinking. I think it's a really cool buff. Megascope going to 4 provisions. I'm not going to lie, I don't really agree with this one. This was the original design of the card at 4 provisions. I actually felt it was very well balanced at 5 provisions, and it's probably overpowered at 4 provisions. I'm not going to lie, I think it deserves to be 5 provisions, but I'm also kind of excited to see it back at 4 provisions. This is what's kind of fun about the Balance Council, right? Like, this card's probably going to go back to 5 provisions at some point in the future, but now for a month or two, we can have a bit of fun with Megascopes at 4 provisions and try out some different decks again. And finally, the Banard Choor. I honestly don't understand how this card works. What does it mean? A unique special card. Whenever you play a unique special card, what is that? What is a unique special card as opposed to a special card? My chat's going to let me know, I'm sure. But I think this card's pretty cool. I don't know if it's that good. I'm not sure. I've not really ever seen it played. And finally, the power increases. These ones are less impactful than the provision changes. This card seems really bad to me. I don't really understand what's going on with this card. Why is it so bad? Damage self by own base power, then split as much damage randomly between enemy units. Okay, I just worked out what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to play it in an onslaught deck, give it a bunch of armor. I guess you're supposed to give it a bunch of armor, and then it just removes its own armor and damages that much randomly. I suppose that's what you're supposed to do. Seems like a good buff, because it doesn't seem that good to me. Up next, we've got Lord Riptide. Controversial 10 power. I believe it was 10 power, originally got nerfed to 9. It was still seeing play. It didn't really deserve to go up, but it's a card that Monster player likes, and Monster players have voted it in. Fair play. Yennefer Conjurer getting buffed to 6 power. That's a big change. We just talked about the Vanadane going from 6 to 5. Well, it's a lot more difficult to remove a 6 power card. Yennefer Conjurer, an iconic Gwent card. I doubt it's going to see much play even at its 6 power. Oh, yes. The one that I was pushing for most. The only one I really cared about. Siri has been buffed. Witcher 4 Celebration is here. The Witcher 4 trailer came out the other day, and it was kind of what inspired me to check out Gwent. And I thought, you know what? This Siri card deserves a buff, and a buff it has got. 5 power. I would be interested in seeing this card at 8 provisions, but we'll have to see how it plays at 5 power. I still think it's not good enough, is my gut feeling, but it's a very exciting change. It's a card advantage card. It's potentially very, very toxic if it's too good, but it's also a completely fascinating card which can completely shift the dynamic of a game of Gwent. Triss Barflies gets a buff. I think this one's also pretty good. I think it deserves a buff. It's a good card, and maybe it's just been power crept a little bit. Roach, 4 power. Roach, what are you doing up there, mate? Quite a fitting card art for this Balance Council change. Don't think Roach deserved a buff, not gonna lie, but honestly, I'm here for it. Why not? I'm here for it. Anah Henrietta, this is the other Nilfgaard buff that I was alluding to. Anah Henrietta being a great assimilate card, potentially. This is a card which Freddy Babes played at Gwent Masters 1 in his Nilfgaard deck, and it performed incredibly well. And yeah, this card getting a power buff, I think, is really, really awesome. Interestingly, also puts it out of coup de grace range, which can kind of make the mirrors a little bit less weird, because you can see some absolute nonsense going on. I watched Zubidu stream this morning, and he had Anah Henrietta in hand, and his opponent slammed the leader, the double cross leader, and stole his Anah Henrietta about 7 times and filled the whole row. Pretty cool. Mutated Hounds gets a point buff. Point buff at a 5 provision card is significantly more impactful than something higher up. And this card looks pretty damn strong. 6 power poison. We also saw Fallen Railer getting a power buff or a provision buff. And she looks like she works with poison. So I think this is a cool change. Kedweni Knight, I love this change. NR bronze cards, the 4 provision cards, I was looking at them yesterday. I couldn't believe how bad they were. And a Kedweni Knight absolutely deserves to beat 8 points off of Amphibious Assault. 7 points is just not enough. Really, really awesome buff. I like this one a lot. Is it going to be good enough to see play? Honestly, I feel like this card could get another power buff, and then it would be a serious contender as a good card. But Portal NR, maybe that's something we could look at today. Portal Northern Realms, Kedweni Knights coming in at 8. It's not quite Portal Fish Flappers, is it? It's not, but it's certainly better than 14-point Portal. And Illusionist going up to 4 power. It's another popular card. I think 3 power is probably more fair for it, although it was originally a 4 power card by the game designers, so that one's kind of been reverted. Overall, I'm pretty impressed by the Balance Council. I think you guys have done a great job. If you're interested in following along the Balance Council recommendations I'm going to have for next season, make sure you subscribe. I do think I'm going to be posting quite a bit more Gwent content moving forwards. I'm really enjoying the game at the moment. It's a lot of fun. My biggest thing I would like to see buffed is I would like to see a few of the Fringe Witcher cards buffed. I'm talking about Geralt Axie. I'm talking about Lambert. I'm talking about selective mutations. I think all of those would be really interesting to get a provision buff, particularly Lambert and Geralt Axie, to bring them into Golden Necker decks potentially. I would also really be fascinated to see if we can get like some Witcher themed decks in Scoia'tael and Nilfgaard being a little bit more meta relevant. I have to say the Megascope buff is probably going to help the Witcher theme of Scoia'tael a little bit, because I've got a Golden Necker Scoia'tael deck, and the Megascopes are already in there, so that deck just got 2 more provisions. It's not exactly all in Witchers. Like, I don't play Quan, I don't play Gezras, but there's some interesting stuff to see. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Give it a like if you did, and let me know in the comments below if there's any cards you would like to see buffed or nerfed next season that I should include in my Balance Council to try and get that pushed through by our community here. Cheers!